Well, here we are. It is Friday, February 17th, 2025. And this is the weekly video. We do these every Friday. We take a look at the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean art markets, the Asian art markets in general. We wander off into Persian rugs and textiles occasionally and talk a bit more and more these days about the American and European art market, the auction market, see what's going on, see what's selling. Is the antique market picking up again and so forth? There's a lot happening. In other words, there's a lot of things going on, and it's always fun to talk about. So this week we're going to look at an upcoming auction down at Leland Little's down in North Carolina. They've got a good looking sale. They have some really good Japanese things. They're being deaccessioned from Yale University, and talk about some results and just sort of delve into things, what's been going on. One of the things I wanted to talk about first, sort of a clarification. The other day when I put the video out, the Patreon video that I shared on YouTube here, I mentioned this sale, the Sanford Smith sale, and he was a well-known guy. And I said that it was done by Giampetro. I misspoke because I was thinking it was a lot of folk art in here, and I always think of Giampetro when it's folk art. It wasn't done by them. It was done by Stair Gallery, and they did a really good job with it. They got some great prices and so forth. And if you don't know who Sanford Smith was, you maybe haven't been collecting antiques for very long. He was one of the premier show dealers in New York City for a long time. He himself was also a collector. He was a scholar. He loved antiquarian books in particular, and he founded the antiquarian book shows in New York. He was the guy that really got it established, got it certified, and became Mecca for book collectors from all over the world. And he was quite a man. He died last year. He was 85 years old. He died, I think, in June of 2024. He was a nice man. I didn't know him terribly well. I met him a few times, and he was always very warm and engaging, and he loved what he did. He absolutely loved the antique business and the art business, and he was fascinated by old books, and he had a lot of interest. And this is his collection, and he was very eclectic, but he loved, obviously, you're going to see by looking at this, he really loved visual three-dimensional art in a great way, sculpture and this sort of thing. And there were some awfully nice pieces in here that went through at Stair Gallery, and they did well. And I'm going to talk about just a few of them to give you an idea of what Mr. Smith loved. And one of them was this. This is a pretty fantastic weather vane. I don't know how much you know about weather vanes, but this one happened to have been made in the 19th century by Cushing and Sons, they believe, right here in Massachusetts, out in Waltham. It was a big industrial area of the city, and they did these, and this was a weather vane, and it was a particularly striking one. It was a great one of the Ram, and you notice the beautiful, the verdigris copper, how it aged over time, and this was about 30 inches in size. It wasn't the size of an actual Ram, but it was good size, and it was just a beautifully, beautifully rendered example. And back in the old days, people would have one of these on their roof with their weather vanes. The most famous one in the Massachusetts, of course, is the famous grasshopper on top of Faneuil Hall downtown in the marketplace. But there were a number of good weather vane makers in the Northeast and in New York State and so forth. And this was a particularly good one. And they've been sort of in the doldrums for the last few years, but not anymore. This sold for $15,000 plus the buyer's premium. Great piece of American folk art. So it ended up selling for about almost double the high estimate. It ended up with the premium. It ended up at around about $21,500. Absolutely great looking example. And he had this fantastic carving of a tiger head. This was a great thing. I wondered if it didn't maybe came off of a carousel or something. It was pretty good size. It was 21 by 16 inches, and it was beautifully done. And it may have been an advert or on a sign or something, but it could have been on a carousel animal, because carousel carvers were heavily collected. Here's the back of it, and so forth. But a beautiful, beautiful one, and very striking to look at. And it sold for about $8,000 with the buyer's premium, a little over, but well worth it. Great example. And he also collected Grenfell rugs. And if you don't know what a Grenfell rug is, you might want to think about them a little bit. These things here. These were woven up in Newfoundland by weavers, and they were sold all over the place. They became very popular folk art in the early 20th century. And this one is of polar bears. They did them of geese. They did trivets out of them. They had Eskimos hunting, all kinds of things that they did on them. And they were widely collected by East Coasters and New Englanders and things. You find these all throughout the East Coast of the United States. You find them a lot in New England, in old houses. And the thing that's interesting about them is that if they turn up in an auction in the Midwest somewhere or an area outside of here, they usually get just listed as a hooked rug. Pictorial hooked rug. But if it's a Grenfell rug, they tend to be very thin, very finely woven, very meticulously done. They in rural auctions, when they're not identified properly, they can sell for $10 or $20 or $30, $5 even, and they typically sell for this price. They typically sell for somewhere between $600 and $1,200 a piece. So if you see one somewhere in an auction or in an antique shop, check it out. Learn a little bit about them, how to identify them. They're very fine, low pile on them, but they're meticulously done. They're really, really beautifully done with good dyes. And you can sometimes pick them up and you can put them into an auction where they're going to get some visibility and make yourself a quick $500 or $1,000. Just a little dealer tip on that one. But they're fun to have. They're very nice. I've always liked them. And he had other things in his collection too. He had these really terrific little cast iron targets from arcades. You may have seen these. They used to shoot them with air guns with a cork in them. They're highly collectible today. They were made by a bunch of different companies. Some of them were stamped metal. Some of them were cast. Some of them were actually very thin sheets of lead. And over the years, I've had the pleasure of selling quite a few of them. And they're very, very nice. They're interesting. They're interesting things. I got a whole box of them once. There was an arcade outside of Boston, a place called the Salem Willows, and they were shutting the Willows down. The arcades, the land had been sold, and they were being liquidated. And I drove by just to see the place one more time because I spent time there as a kid. And out in front of one of the really good arcades were boxes of arcade stuff. And in one of them were a whole bunch of these these targets, and they were all different types of birds and ducks and things. And they were free. And I said to the guy, I said, "You throwing those out?" And he goes, "Yeah, they're going to go." And I took them all. I loaded them into my van and took off with them and ended up selling them at the time to an American folk art dealer who was in Essex, Mass. A wonderful guy named Stephen Score saw them. He loved them, and I sold them to him. And he took them to a show in New York, and I think he probably got $20 a piece for them down there. So it was a pretty good thing. Anyway, back to this. He also had this. This was one of the nicest cigar store Indians I've seen in a long time. Beautiful, beautiful example. They think it was made by Cromwell in New York. He was a well-known carver of these. And what was really nice about this was it still had its hatchet. You notice the hatchet here. These are usually long gone. Usually the feathers on top of the head are chipped because these were meant to go outside. The store owner would push it outside if he didn't leave it out overnight under the eave of his building. To signify that it was a cigar store, tobacco store. And this was a very, very nice one. It was over 6 feet tall, 6.5 feet tall, beautifully carved, wonderful details, good patina and all that. And even the shoes are detailed. When you look at these, they're absolutely great pieces of American folk art. And it was estimated at 20 to 40,000, and it ended up selling for about 32,000 with the buyer's premium. All in and all done, because there's a commission, of course, that gets thrown on top at the end of the sale. But at any rate, I just wanted to point out that this was a sort of a positive sign, because folk art like this a few years ago was really in the doldrums. It wasn't doing anything. It was a very slow market. And now it's doing much, much, much better. And he had some great pieces, and everything in here did fine. And there were some pieces that went very reasonably, of course, as you have in every sale. But overall, it was a very, very successful little auction. And I'm hoping that the Western and American folk art and European art and European furniture market is starting to get some interest from people because it hasn't had much interest for a long time, and I don't know why. Spectacular things with historic interest, with interesting histories are always fun to look at and understand and put them in context to the period and why they were made. It's all this stuff is very fascinating, just like all antiques are, as far as I'm concerned. All right, and the other thing that's coming up, we're going to get into the Leland sale in a second, but I wanted to mention that Material Culture over in Pennsylvania has a sale coming up. Let's see, they're in Philadelphia. When is the sale? It's in about almost a little under 3 weeks from now, and they do some pretty good rug auctions. If you've been looking for good rugs and textiles, this is a pretty good little sale. Some of the things are fairly common, but some of them are rather nice. And he's got things like this. This is a Persian Kemsa bird rug, and they're known for doing this with all these little birds all over them. The colors of these rugs and the wool quality is extremely fine. These are beautifully woven tribal rugs. And they would used to bring them into the market and sell them to get money for things that they're going to buy. They were trade goods basically, but beautifully hand woven, hand spun wool, hand dyed wool, all natural vegetable dyes. This is a wonderful carpet. And if you don't have one of these, you don't have Persian rugs in your house, I urge you to get one, get a couple. They really make a room. The colors are great and absolutely beautiful scenes. And there's a great deal you can learn about the pictorial messages behind them and so forth, and why they were done and when they were done. And these were done by predominantly nomads, sheep herders and so forth. And this would be for the wool from their own sheeps. And then they would make, in many cases, they made their own dyes, so they traded dyes to make rugs. So it's a pretty interesting area of study. I've been fascinated by rugs like this for 40 years. I've collected them. Absolutely love them. But this is a good one, and it measures 4.5 by 6, 4 foot. 4'6" by 6'2", so it's a good size rug for a lot of areas in a house. It's estimated at $200 to $2,500. It'll probably sell for around $1,000 to $1,500. I think $200 to $2,500 is a little aggressive for it. Years ago, back in the '90s, this rug would have sold for $3,500 to $4,000 very easily. But today, the rug market's gotten soft because people don't understand what the merit is in having beautiful carpets. Something I don't understand. And also, there's some very nice Turkoman pieces, Central Asian tribal pieces like this. This is called a shuwal. It's a saddlebag, very nicely woven, very unusual color palette, very striking contrast in colors. Usually they don't have this strong a level of contrast. Usually the reds and everything are much more together, so to speak. This one, the pattern really, really stands out on it, which makes it, I think, rather beautiful and so forth. And this will probably sell for $500 to $700. And also this Turkoman Turkey main carpet. If you're familiar with the Pakistani Bukharas that they peddle in rug shops all over the place, this is where the pattern came from. This is an old one from the 19th century, and beautiful glowing colors, great pattern. And this is a sort of a bigger rug. It's 6 by 9, and would look absolutely great in any house. You could hang them on. A lot of people hang them on walls as like tapestries because they're very thin. They tend to be quite thin, but it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. Beautiful example. And then there's some Chinese rugs. I wanted to mention that too. There's some Chinese pictorial carpets in here. There's some room-size rugs in the sale. This is a fairly small one. It's only 5 by 5 feet, but nice image. I like the border decoration, and I love all the precious objects in the middle, the incense burners and the flower vases and the flower trays, flower planter trays and so forth in it. This is rather nice. And it's estimated at $800 to $1,200 with a $400 opening bid, but it's in very good condition. It's in beautiful, beautiful shape. The pile on it looks very, very good, and the colors are still good. So you might want to check that out. Now, on to some sales that are coming up. One of the sales I wanted to mention, I was looking at this sale this morning. I got a kick out of it because I spotted a couple of things in here that are quite interesting for Asian art fans. But this sale so much reminded me of auctions that they ran back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, where the auctioneer would go to a house and literally take everything in the house. Right? Even if the house had major pieces of American furniture and European furniture and great Chinese objects and things. When an auctioneer would clean out a house in the old days, they took everything right down to the Sears lawnmower. And whether they did the sale on site under a big tent, or they took it to a hall to sell it, or at their own hall, or at a VFW hall, or whatever, they took everything. Everything went in trucks. They took screwdrivers, you name it. If it was sellable, it went. And so when you went to a sale, you saw a wide range of things from just stuff and then a Chippendale chest of furniture or something. But this is an interesting sale in that regard because they have a lot of things in here that you don't see much anymore in auctions that much. Oil lamps, for example. In the old days, especially in New England, all the houses had lots of oil lamps in them because it was the way you lit your house. And it wasn't unusual when I was first going into the business to go into a house for an estate call, and they'd have 20 or 30 or more oil lamps scattered around the house and a bunch of them down in the basement, parts of oil lamps, because if one broke, they wouldn't throw the fittings out, they'd save it. And there'd be all kinds of pieces like this. So all of this stuff looks very reminiscent of the old auctions that we used to see. They've got some nice European prints in here if you're a print buyer and so forth. And there's a rug that looks like a Grenfell rug. Look at that. There you go. You want to check that out? That might be a Grenfell. If it's not a Grenfell, boy, somebody was copying one pretty well. But that's the kind of thing. This is how they pop up sometimes. Any rate, down here, the postcards and one thing and another, and then you go through it. It's a fun thing to look at. It really is. It's interesting. But one of the things that is in this sale is this. This is a lot. What's the lot number on this? 577 in this. Two very nice Korean porcelains. And the one on the right, the blue one's a nice Joseon. They're both Joseon period, 18th century. The one on the right is a nice cobalt blue decorated example with flowers all over it. And the one on the left is a white glazed example with a cup form mouth. They're both in pretty good shape from what I remember looking at them earlier. This one has a couple of hairlines around the top, which is pretty typical of these. It's not a surprise at all. And hairlines on Korean things like this don't have the impact that they have on Chinese things when they get hairlines. It's a different game. There's the bottom of it with all that kiln grid on there and that thickened glaze. It's very rustic looking. And then you have this. This is a rather nice little vase. This really is. It's a good little example. There's the bottom of it, quite well finished actually, with a creamy glaze on the bottom. 18th century, and they give them a $10 to $100. I think everything in the sale's got a $10 to $100 estimate on it, but they should bring $500 to $700. These two vases. They probably should have split them up. Maybe they didn't think they were worth it. Who knows? But at any rate, you get two in this, and they're both very attractive. You should be happy to have them. And then they have this. Now, this is an interesting thing. If you haven't seen these before, these are abalone shells. And his carved. This is Chinese, carved with two dragons on it, chasing the pearl. The pearl is right in the middle there, right there. And the deal with these is that they would get an abalone shell, and they had a technique for extracting the pearl surface on the inside of an abalone shell, getting it out of the shell, and then they would reticulate it like this pierce it with all these little holes and open it up this way. Often they didn't. Often they just incise decorated into it, because piercing it, you ran a big risk of wrecking the whole piece by cracking it by when you cut through it. And this was a very brave carver and a very skilled carver. If you notice, the details of the dragon's body are exceptional here. And then you have the waves. They even added waves scrolling across the bottom. It's a nice bit. And this was made in the late 19th century, probably, maybe the early 20th, but it's definitely old. And it should bring $300 or $400 anyway. It's got a very nice stand, incidentally. It's got an apple blossom stand under it here, with using the branches folding out to support the shell. It's rather well done, nicely done. And then over to this. This is the thing that caught my eye the most in the whole sale. There are two of them by Isabel Clark Forbes. She was the wife of a member of the Forbes family who was in China for the China traders. They were a major China trade family, as many of you know, if you've been watching any length of time. The Forbeses were tied to Perkins and Company in Boston. It was one of the most powerful China trade firms in the United States at the time. They became incredibly influential, and the money that flowed out of this business went into establishing a lot of the banking and investment stuff that went on in the United States. And even they were so good at it that there were Chinese Hong merchants who wanted to invest with them. There was one who actually did. He gave one of the Forbeses, it was either $100,000 or $200,000 back around about 1840 or something, to invest in railroads and things in America for him. They were very, very trusted people. And the wives that would go over there on these trips for these China traders weren't allowed to go to Canton. Women were not allowed in Canton. So they had to live in the islands of Macau and outside of that area. And Mrs. Forbes apparently took up watercolor painting while she was there, which was a pretty common pastime during the 19th century. And she painted these, and she identified the scenes. And then somebody took the time to get them all framed. And this is Shifu, and down here is Mandarin Point, and so forth. You notice it's not Hong Kong, it's not the Hongs, because she wouldn't have had that vantage point. There was a story though once about one of the Hong merchants, and it might have been one of the Forbeses actually, who brought his wife secretly to Canton because he missed her during the trading season so much. So he had her staying in one of the Hongs, and the Chinese government heard about it. They just about lost their minds, nearly started a riot to get her out of there because there was such an embargo on foreigners bringing their wives into the Hongs. For trading, because there were trading periods were a few months in the spring, a few months in the fall, and that was it. They weren't there continuously 12 months of the year initially. But at any rate, that's another story. But she was there, and she painted these pictures. And I think they're terrific. And this picture measures about 16 by 27 inches in height. So it's pretty good size, all set to go. And that's a nice one. And then she did this one. And this one, apparently, she did from from the front steps of where they were staying. Because down here at the bottom, it says from the bungalow. Here it is. Taken from front door steps of the Chang bungalow, and I think that's probably where they were living. October 1877. Isabel Clark Forbes. And it's a rather nice scene. She's a pretty good watercolorist, I have to say. And here's this nice scene of the bay, and you see some ships in the background and so forth, and another house up on the hill here. And there were probably a lot of Westerners living in this area, along with Chinese locals. And this is the kind of thing they did. And if you collect China trade stuff, this was a real bit of history, because this was, it's really special to see something that was painted by somebody who was American, who was over there at that time, and looking out and painting what she was seeing in China during the China trade period. Because the China trade area really ended about 10, 15 years after this. It really, really wound down. So she was there through the sort of the peaks of it, and then it sort of tapered off, and other trade took place over it, of course. But at any rate, it's just a good piece of history, and I think in the long run you'd be very happy to own it. And then on to some of the auctions that are coming up. There's the Willy Weiss de Jager's got a sale. I was looking at it this morning, and I'll be updating the global pages and the Patreon pages with the pieces. We're going to go through it in the morning and sort of cherry pick out the best pieces and see what's in here, because there are some reproductions I noticed in the sale. And this particular company, for whatever reason, I don't quite understand, they typically don't date things. I don't know why. Very often they don't bother with dates on things. They just say blue and white plate. Like this is a Kangxi period plate. Yeah, blue and white charger. Chenhua mark, which is very commonly found on the backs of Chinese blue and white of the period, even after. And of course, the Japanese put Chenhua marks on everything. But this was a Kangxi period plate with a Chenhua mark. It's 15 inches or so, or isn't it 15 inches? How big is it? About 15 inches in diameter, 37 centimeters. It's a good sized dish. It's got a 3 to 4,000 euro, 3 to 6,000 euro estimate. I think that's a little aggressive, but it's a very nice plate. But you'll notice there's no dates on a lot of the listings. So we're going to go through this and pick out the pieces we like. There's quite a bit in here that's perfectly good. I'm not saying a lot of it is fake, but there's some cleverly deceptive pieces that they're making these days that do slip into these sales. And these guys sort of skip dating altogether at this point to avoid the headaches. This one they're calling 18th century, but some of them they don't bother. All right, so there's one they called 18th century, and they're right, they are. They're nice looking early mid Qianlong examples, beautifully done. And estimate 240 to 500 euros, 160 euro opening bid. All very reasonable. All right, and then over to this. This is the Leland Little sale that's coming up. And I heard from Kendall the other day. I mentioned it in the video this week that they had a sale coming up, but she sent me a couple of pictures of things that were coming along in it. And she had mentioned that there were some deaccessions in here from Yale University. There's quite a few of them. If you're a Japanese ceramic collector, Japanese pottery, tea wares, tea caddies, mizusashis, all that sort of thing. This is a really good sale because this is good stuff. It was donated by a family in memory of their father some time ago, apparently, and the museum is deciding to deaccession it, which I think is not great. Unless the family says, fine, go ahead and sell it, we don't care. But often people donate things to university museums thinking they're going to be there in the old alma mater forever. And I'm just going to tell you that much of the time they already have plans to sell it before the donation is even completed, particularly with some of the bigger colleges. I've made some remarkable buys from university deaccessions because they were improperly sold and dumped in local auctions, and it's very strange. I don't understand it. So if you're ever going to donate anything to your alma mater or your family school or whatever it is, ask them, are they guaranteeing that it's not, is it going to be in the museum at least for 10 or 20 years before it's sold? And might even say, look, if you're going to sell it someday, we want it back. All right. You can't take the donation deduction for that, but you can lend it to them, because a lot of this stuff, they beg for it, and they beg for it because they want to sell it down the road when you're no longer paying attention. Just the way it is. I can tell you horror stories. At any rate, there's this. This is very nice. It's a piece of feiwa, and it's quite a nice example. It's a big one too. The incense burner itself, it's Ming. The incense burner itself is about a little over 12 inches tall, and with the stand, it's about 15 inches tall. And it's particularly nice because it's not chipping anywhere. As you know, if you bought Ming pottery and feiwa wares, you know that very often, if it gets a little wet, moisture gets into it, because it's pottery, the glaze tends to fall off and you end up losing glaze all over the place. And I've seen examples like this where there's only maybe 20% of the glaze is still on the piece. This one looks like it's all there, which is great. And it's not new. This is an old one. This is a 16th century example. And I love the fish handles on here. Instead of using dragons, they put these sort of almost look like dolphin handles on the piece, and these beautiful colors, this warm amber brown that they have in here, combined with this sort of aqua blue, and then the green. I think it all works out very, very, very well, and has a lovely lid on it. It's a nice looking thing. Beautiful example, and it should do pretty well. It's because it's big. It's a big presentation size. Should bring $800 to $1,200 or more, something like that. It's a nice thing. And then hopping along over to this, there's a very good little Blanc de Chine censer that they've got in the sale. Nice shape, beautifully done. Has an old cover on it. Looks like this might have come from a Japanese collection, because there's a mon on top of the piece. And the lid, this is an incense burner, but the lid is not reticulated to let the smoke out. So this would have been put on there just to seal it up. Now, they may have wanted to seal it up once the incense was put out, but often when you see this type of decoration on a lid, it means it might have come from a Japanese collection at some point. There's the interior. And this is a late 17th century example, but nicely done. And should bring somewhere in the $1,000 to $1,500 range. It measures, how big is it? 6 inches across. Pretty standard size. Nice looking thing. And there's a Kangxi brush pot. This is a Kangxi example. It has a hairline in the bottom, but it's interesting because on one side of it, you have these, officials standing here looking rather impressive with their bellies sort of stuck out, wearing these long, luxurious robes on a beautiful veranda and so forth. And then when you turn around the piece, who's on the other side? Their attendants. And there you have somebody with a fan, people carrying things, carrying hats and so forth, waiting to serve the boss. And that's the way it was. People had servants back then, and they would follow them around and take care of whatever they needed and so forth. And it was a pretty good job, actually. But this was a nice looking pot. It does have a hairline in the bottom. There it is. So because of that, instead of bringing 12 or 15 or 18,000, it's probably going to sell in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. But if you've been looking for a Kangxi brush pot and the hairline and the crack in the bottom doesn't bother you, because it doesn't go around anywhere, it's just through the base. It doesn't extend into the body of the porcelain. So it's like a spider crack on the bottom of a big vase. So it may not pull the value down too much, but it may pull it down just enough to make it buyable for some folks. And it's a good example. It's a nice example. It really is good looking. And then over to this, another brush pot. This one is a late 19th century example, most likely. They're saying it might be Zeton wood, and it's I don't think it is. It doesn't look like Zeton to me, but may in person. Woods can look very different in person than they do in photographs because of the light. But it's a nice later 19th century, maybe early 20th century example, and it's all carved, and it has this scholar sitting under his favorite pine tree, leaning with his elbow on a table. You can see the table, and he's outside with it with precious objects, because it was a tradition where they would, during a beautiful day, they would have the servants bring some tables and furniture, attendants bring things outside so you could spend the day enjoying nature. They'd much prefer enjoying nature outdoors than thinking about nature in indoors, so they would go outside. And one of the things that they often did in these sort of later 19th century pieces is they used this color green, this very, very pretty green, on wood carvings to highlight so you could see the carving better. And they used it you'll also see this color on Yixingware, on the pottery. They took it to doing that. Sometimes they do calligraphy in this green on pottery. But this is a nice looking brush pot. It presents itself very well. It's nicely carved. It looks, it's got a poem, some script on the back. Here's the interior. There's the bottom of it. And this, it should bring $500 to $700 anyway. And then the tea dust glaze vase. Now, this vase, she had sent me pictures of this, and she wasn't convinced that it's got a Chin-Lung mark. She's not convinced it's Chin-Lung. I think she thinks it's probably a 19th century example, and I agree with her. The way the mark is done, the shape of the vase, the color, and so forth. But it's a very nice 19th century tea dust glaze vase. It's 13 inches tall. It's in very, very good condition, and it came from the Cody collection. And if you may remember, a couple of years ago, they sold other things from that family. And this is the grandson of Wild Bill Cody. He was a Chinese porcelain collector. Who knew? And this is one of there's a couple of pieces in here from his collection. There's this one. There's a blue vase. There's I believe, a bronze, and some other things. So it's worth taking a look. But this is a nice vase, regardless. It is Qing, I believe. It's a late Qing example. I meant to show you the bottom, the foot on this with that black ink in the wear and so forth, and the way it's set back and the thickness of the foot all looks perfectly fine for that date. So I think that's probably what it is, but it's a good looking vase and it's a nice size. So if you're looking for a good piece of tea dust, you want to chase that. Then there's this big Xuan statue. This is a statue. It's 17 inches tall, and it's a rendering of those classic Chinese rocky hillsides with houses built into them, which is something they did. Some of the great monasteries in China were built into the sides of these massive flat walls. How they did it, I've never been able to understand. How everybody did get killed making these things. But they also had homes and residences built in like this. And here you have a very nice depiction of it. It's a great way to see it if you're in a foreign land and you're wondering, what do you mean they build them into the side of the walls? This is how they do it. And you notice that they've done a good job with sort of an amber brown glaze and black on the rocks, and then making the building itself stand out by using aqua blue, medium blues, whites, and browns, and so forth. Here you have this lovely little latticed window here with a wood carving over it, and you have figures and so forth. And it all looks to be in very good shape, which is quite remarkable for these, because these are often smashed to bits and bumped and chipped, and because there's so many opportunities. Just look at it, how many edges there are. There's so many opportunities to cause damage. And this one seems to have survived quite well. And these were made in the Guangdong province by the Xuan pottery makers. They make all the famous, the roof tiles and all that stuff. It's an amazing. Place got amazing history. And here you have it. And this is a nice one. And it's like I said, it's 17 inches tall, 13 inches wide, so it's pretty big. And it should bring $1,000 or $1,500 anyway. Could bring more. Some people really, really love these things. And then over here, you've got two table lamps. And what's really nice about these is they didn't drill them out to fit them as lamps. They're back mounted all with these pipes. And these are old mounts. These mounts look like they're probably from the 1920s or something, the way they've done the patina. One of them has a replaced socket. That's not the original socket. And that might be like a 1950s socket, but the rest of it looks pretty old. And it's a nice looking one pair. Now, the one on the left is a Wutsai decorated Kangxi piece. They call them ho-ho boys sometimes. And it's a nice one. He looks like he's in pretty good shape. He's carrying a vase and so forth, which they sometimes are depicted with. And then on the right is what looks like it's either porcelain or soft paste. It's hard to tell because they did do some soft paste figures of Buddha figures, but this is a very nice Buddha. He's got a great face on him. He's got a nice fat belly. He's clutching his pearls. And get over here. There's a good shot of his head. There it is. Yeah, there's the head. Beautiful head, beautiful face, wonderful facial expression, jolly fellow, and nicely glazed all the way down. And the fingers are all intact. Often the fingers are chipped off on these things. This thing looks perfectly good. Looks good. And I expect it to bring $600 to $900 for the two lamps, but they could have sold them separately, I think, but evidently they didn't want to. But this white piece probably was made in the later 19th century. Could have even made a little after that, actually, but it doesn't matter. It's very attractive, good looking, and it would be fantastic with a light over it. It would look amazing. Okay, now this is one of the sleepers in the sale, I think, because they didn't spend too much time writing about it. I've had these before. They're saying it's green ground, possibly jade. I can't think about what else it would be. You can always scratch test it. They should probably have a gemologist look at it if they're not certain, because this is a very good type of jade. These gilt decorated jade screens, I've had them over the years, and this one looks absolutely fine as jade because the workmanship on it is so meticulous. I want to show you this there. All right. When you look at the work in here, how well this was painted, I suspect this is nephrite jade. From what I'm seeing, it certainly looks like it. It's very, very nice. They're calling it four-panel spinach green hardstone four-panel screen. They should get it scratch tested or get it run it by a gemologist, have a look at it, because if this is jade, it's a very good thing. And it's easy enough to test. It is meticulously done. The decoration is all in perfect condition. It looked like somebody hinged it. These would generally came like in books. And sometimes they would take them out of the books, and they would Yamanaka and Company in Boston and other firms. They had ways of attaching hinges to make little folding table screens out of these. But this looks like an awfully good piece of gilt jade. And they did them. Sometimes they do just one panel and so forth. But generally speaking, you don't do this much gilt work if it's not jade. Has an unbelievable amount of painting on it, and whoever the gilder was that did this would have certainly would have merited being allowed to work on jade sheets, and he wouldn't have used some look-alike stone. So I'd be very, very surprised if this wasn't jade, but it's a wonderful thing. And it has a fissure in here. Now that may not go through. That may not be a break. That may just be in the stone itself, a vein in the stone. But I don't see anything in here that makes me think it's serpentine or some other stone. But ask them to get it checked. If it is jade, it's a minimum $10,000 screen. This could do very, very well. Each of these panels should be worth $3,000 or $4,000, I would think. It's very nice work. Figure it that way. So do check it out. And the back of it is also wonderfully decorated, which doesn't surprise me at all. The beautiful bird scene. And the backs are usually slightly less elaborate than the fronts. That way you can sort of tell the difference. And the same thing happens when they do regular floor screens. The front of the screen will be very elaborate. The back of the screen will be more simply decorated, but quite nice just the same. And then over to this Japanese bronze incense burner. It's a good one. I love the foo dog on top. The foo dog on top is so ferocious. Look at him. He's very animated. He's snarling back. He's got his tail up, spraying out in all directions, and a good surface on it. And of course, these bronzes from the Meiji period always have such nice patinas on them. That very warm cocoa brown patina. And this example is in very, very nice condition. And this is a big incense burner. It's not a little incense burner. This thing is 20 inches tall, including the stand, 17 inches without the stand. All right. So don't be surprised if it brings, $1,200 to $1,800. It's a very, very nice big piece. Very attractive. Very, very attractive indeed. And then over to this piece of Shibayama ware. This is one of the nicest pieces of Shibayama I've seen in a few years. Meticulously done all the way around. And notice on the outer edge, the very, very finely worked, almost like jewelry. These insects. You got grasshoppers, snails, dragonflies, beetles, snake. Ooh, you got a snake down there. There's a frog at the bottom, a snail without its shell, a butterfly, another some sort of cicada, and like I don't know what that is. It looks like a giant housefly, but I don't think it is. And another insect that I don't know. I don't know a lot about bugs, but it's beautifully done. And the center of it is worked excellent work. It's just excellent work. And it's a basket of flowers with the loop handle, and in the same pattern that you see often in Chinese porcelain of the 18th century, the center of the plate, and they'd have the big loop handle and all the flowers pouring out. The Japanese were also very much fans of that, and the Japanese did emulate and copy a lot of the stuff that was popular in China too, because they were huge collectors of Chinese art. In Japan, they had been for hundreds of years. They were huge fans. Oddly, the Chinese never bought anything from the Japanese. I don't know why, but that's the way it was. But some of the best Chinese collections in the world are in Japan. It always surprises people, but it's true. They've been buying it since the Ming Dynasty and maybe before. Any rate, this one is overlaid with the wisteria here, with mother of pearl and little bits of coral on the flowers and so forth. It's just and the way that they did the basket at the bottom, it's all woven, very three-dimensional, and then you have the birds landing and so forth. This is a very, very nice piece, and it's about 10 inches in diameter, as I recall. 9 3/4 inches, just a little under 10 inches wide, and it should bring $4,000 to $6,000. I think it's a very, very, very fine example, and the insects on the border really make it. That's such an added element that you don't always see on these. That's almost like if those insects were being sold separately, what would you pay? What would a collector pay for them? Probably $400 or $500 a piece. They're very, very nice. So do the math. And then there's a whole bunch of good Japanese pottery in this sale. There's probably, I don't know, 60 or 70 lots, 70 lots of it. And it's all from Yale University, from this family, Frederick Osorio. It was donated it was given to the museum by Pia Cristina Osorio in memory of her father, I would assume. And they have these beautiful pieces of early pottery. These are mostly, Sung in that era. Nice big bowl. You got this Hanan black glazed jar, another bowl in black. I like that black bowl a lot. I think it's very rustic looking. And then a later, late Ming to early Qing bronze incense burner. But nicely done. Very, very nicely done, all of them. It's a good lot. What's it going to bring? Probably, well, the bronze might push it up a little bit, but probably $400 to $600, $500 to $700. But it's worth it. It's a good lot. And then there's a Korean Buncheong wine bottle. This is a well-known pattern, Joseon period. Nice slip decoration and so forth. And you've seen them around. A lot of museums have these. And they typically are white glaze down just below the midsection, and then it's a brown glaze below that. And you'll find a little ash glaze sometimes on the body as well, of course. And then you have these iron brown decorations swirling around it. And this is a nice example. If you collect Korean wares, you want to look at this stuff. You want to look at this, you want to look at the stuff in that other sale. And these will all be on the Global and Patreon pages by tomorrow. But this is a nice example. And then hopping along over here, another Korean thing. Now in this is a sleeper here. If you're a Korean ceramic buyer, you want to look at this. That water dropper on the left is probably an 18th century example, and it's huge. It's a huge water dropper. It's 6 inches in diameter, and it looks very much like the moon jars that you're so familiar with, the ones that turn up and they bring vast amounts of money. Even the modern ones can sell for over $150,000, $200,000. This is an old one, and it's a water dropper with that same type of glaze. As it's a white glaze with a little blue in it, little cobalt's been added to it, and it's just meticulously done. It's beautiful, and there's this very charming, it almost gets overshadowed, this really charming olive green water dropper down here, also very early, 16th or 17th century. This is a nice lot. If you're a Korean ceramic buyer or you like unusual ceramics, you want to look at this. It should bring a couple of $1,000s, but we'll see. It's already got 14 people watching it, and the listing just went up a few hours ago. So we'll see how it does. And then there's more. This is a selection of assorted Korean wares and so forth. Now, one of the pieces in here they have listed as Korean is this little crackleware piece down here in the corner with that glaze. That looks Chinese to me. I noticed that earlier. I'm going to go over to this. You might want to check that out. The inlaid pieces, these, yeah, they look Korean, but this looks Chinese to me. That looks like a Korean giware type thing, 18th century giware. If I found it somewhere, that's what I think it was. But at any rate, it's a good lot. The Mizusashi in here with the Mishima decoration, these flowers stamped around the top, and then there's some white inlay and so forth. Very classic decorative techniques with that white clay. It's a good lot if you like Korean works. And then there are these Japanese pieces. These are clamshell shaped things, and they have the museum put a tag on the back of them. Here it is. Sanuki ware dish in the form of a clamshell by Tsunuyo Tokugawa. Now, they're dating these as Edo period, 19th century, and I think they're probably right. These are very, very nice. And making clamshells is a worldwide tradition in porcelain and pottery. You'll find clamshells in shell forms made by, if there's a kiln in pottery, at some point they're going to make a shell. It just seems. Wedgwood made them. Lots of companies in America made them. They made them out of hard porcelain. They made them out of soft paste. They made them out of pottery. These were done in Japan, of course. They're very, very nice. And then she had a bit of a write-up in here explaining what they were used for and so forth to do with painting and copying painting techniques. It's sort of an interesting thing. But they are just charming examples. They're about 4 or so inches long. I liked them a lot. I thought they were pretty terrific. And then you have this Japanese freshwater jar, Mizusashi. Here it is on the left. This very rustic type with, lots of, burns and so forth from the kiln. And these were the water jars for tea ceremony. So when people in Japan, when they did the tea ceremony, they had to bring out very, very clean water. Often they had water from very specific places. There were stories how there was one tea master who only used the water that dripped off the leaves of a certain tree and that sort of thing. There was a real Zen thing going on with water back then. And this Mizusashi is very rustic looking, very nice. They're dating it as early 20th century. Could be older. It looks like it could be older by the back of it, the way it looks down here at the bottom. But regardless, it's very traditional. It's very classic, and it's very attractive. And there's the top of it and so forth. It has a glazed interior to hold the water in place and so forth. And it comes with this dandy little chaire, this tea caddy. This is a very old tea caddy, 17th, maybe early 18th century, but it's a real old one. And there's an ivory lid. You often see these white ivory lids on old tea caddies, very common. And they usually come with a little slip bag and so forth. Very, very nice. What will it bring? Who knows? $300 to $500. I think it's great. If you like it enough and you pay $1,000 or $2,000 for it, go ahead and do it. All right, it's a nice thing. And then you have this blue and white sake bottle, Trikuri. This is a good one. And it's got the spout in the middle instead of on the edge. It's got this old wire handle. And this is a sort of a later 19th century example, judging from what I'm seeing. Nicely done, though. Beautiful decoration on the top. Very nicely done. The spout isn't damaged, so you can still use it for the purpose. Oh, it's got an old tag on it. Awada. Okay, they're dating it to about 1700. So they've looked this thing up. They think it's very old. Now that may be an old tag too, so you don't know how accurate it is. But they're dating it to the Edo period. That's what they're doing here. But it's certainly a nice example. Very, very good looking. The way that handle is done, I tend to think it might be a little bit later. But I like the bridge. I like all of it. And if you collect Japanese ceramics, you want to look at that. That's a nice looking piece. Very, very attractive. And what it'll bring? Probably $600 or $800, maybe more. If they get a bunch of Japanese collectors chasing this stuff, it's going to do very, very well. And then you have the ceramic basin. I think that may be a cooking thing here. It's wonderfully shaped. It's got these 3 pad feet. They have it resting on top of this stand. Here's the interior of it. Very classic, typical, sort of rusticated finish on it. Like it a lot. and see what it brings. See what it brings. Probably 300 to 500, somewhere in that price range. And then there's this Japanese octagonal stem cup, probably from Hizen and the Arita kilns, but they were doing it to emulate, of course, Ming wares. This is done very much like late Ming porcelain Wutsai examples. And for a long time, when these turned up in the market, until people really paid attention and started going through the old books, whenever these pieces turned up, they often got sold as being Chinese. As late Ming wares, because people want them to be Ming wares, and and that's what the Japanese were trying to do when they made them. They were working from them, and this is a very small cup. It's not as big as it seems. It's only about a little over about 2.5, 2 and 3/4 inches tall, or 2 inches tall. It's a fairly small cup, but very delicately and nicely done. And it's got its box, of course, like all good Japanese objects do. And what'll it bring? $300 to $500 probably, I would guess. And then and the sale is very nice. It's a good sale. Go through it, check it out. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. The prices I don't think are going to be crazy. You'll have a few things that do very well, but in general, I think it's the kind of sale that if you're a collector and you want to own interesting things, all this stuff has the feeling of being interesting. And a lot of that Japanese stuff I think is absolutely wonderful. And you don't see collections of early Japanese chaires. And there's also sake bowls and sake cups and other forms in there. I didn't get into all the bowls and cups. There's some very, very nice pottery bowls in there, beautifully glazed. Check it out. And you don't see them anymore that often because those kinds of collections were formed long ago. These big collections of, dozens and dozens and dozens of pieces. The biggest one, of course, was the Morse collection at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. But there are lots of collections along that idea that are smaller, more manageable sizes than 10,000 pieces of Japanese pottery. But really wonderful examples. So when they do turn up, take advantage of it, because there are less and less and less of those sales. There used to be sales like this once a month back in the 1980s, literally. There'd be a sale with a collection like that coming out once a month because the people that collected them were passing on. And but now it's 40 years later. They've been dispersed or absorbed into institutional collections. All right, now I'm throwing this here in I'm sort of getting to the end of it here, but this is a nice Kangxi plate that was at Doyle's, and it didn't sell it because it had a hairline in it. I don't get it. It was only estimated $1,200 to $1,800. The starting price was $600. I don't know why it didn't sell. Maybe somebody can explain it. But if you feel like it, give Richard a call down at Doyle, see if it's available. Maybe it is. The owner may want to sell it, and you may get a good buy post auction. You always remember post auction sales. Whenever you see a past lot, think about, is it available post auction? Because very often they are, and very often you get a very agreeable deal on it. So give this a look. This is a well-known Kangxi type. They say it has a hairline in it. I looked at the pictures pretty carefully. I couldn't see it, but if they say there's a hairline, I'm sure. But it's a nice example. It's visual, and it's 15 inches in diameter. This is a big piece of porcelain, 15-inch charger. And the last thing is the sensor. I just wanted to mention this. This was the sensor from the Jungkook collection that sold out at Sunburst. It sold in the 90s, 97, I think it was, from the Stephen Jungkook collection. He was a major Midwest American collector. And we thought it would bring $4,000 to $6,000. It ended up selling for well over that, actually, with the buyer's premium, because the hammer price was $6,000 plus 30%. So you're up to $7,800 for it. But it was an awfully nice bronze. Very nice looking, and they had the catalog where it came from. So you got the whole package right there, and I assume you get the catalog with the bronze. So that's a pretty good thing too. All right, so that's it. That's about it for the week. Thanks for watching, and as you know, we're going away next Wednesday, and we'll be back early March. And we'll do some recordings from down there. We're bringing the camera along and so forth. It'll be a lot of fun. And so watch for a video next week, and we'll see you all later on. Okay. And the inquiry service will be more or less shut down. I won't be dealing with any of those while I'm on vacation because I really can't. All right. And but I'll tell you what goes on, and see you all soon. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment, and thanks so much for watching. Okay. Bye-bye.